There's a strange shift that happens in attraction, and most men never see it coming. One day she's replying fast, laughing at your messages, leaning into the conversation, and then something changes. Not because you did something wrong, but because you did something too much. You became available. And in psychology, when something becomes too easy to access, the brain quietly starts to value it less. Here's the uncomfortable question most men never ask themselves. Did she lose interest in you? Or did you accidentally train her to? In this video, we're breaking down exactly why attraction often drops when a man becomes too available, even if nothing bad happened. You'll understand the hidden psychology behind pursuit, emotional tension, and why consistency alone is not enough to maintain attraction. We'll connect real behavioral psychology principles like scarcity perception, reward anticipation, and psychological reactance into something practical you can actually use in real dating situations. And by the end, you won't just understand what went wrong in the past. You'll understand how attraction is built, maintained, and quietly lost in everyday interactions without either person realizing it. Because once you see this pattern, you stop repeating it. Think about this. She meets you, and at first there's a bit of uncertainty. You reply, but not instantly. You're present, but not always reachable. She starts thinking about you between messages, wondering what you're doing, interpreting small gaps. Then something shifts. You start replying instantly. You clear your schedule. You become predictable. Always there. Always responsive. And slowly, her mind stops leaning forward. Psychologically, this connects to what's known as reward anticipation. The brain is wired to value what it has to work for slightly more than what is immediately available. It's not manipulation, it's neurology. When everything becomes predictable, the emotional tension disappears. And without tension, attraction often loses its edge. Now here's the key point. She didn't stop liking you. She stopped leaning into you. And that difference changes everything. So the real question is, when did you stop being something she had to reach toward? Transition. And once that challenge disappears, something even more subtle begins to happen. Picture this scenario. A guy starts dating a woman he really likes. At first, he keeps a healthy rhythm. He has his own life, his own priorities. She's engaged, curious, invested. But then he starts overcorrecting. He wants to secure the connection. So he becomes constantly available. Morning texts, midday check-ins, instant replies at night. At first, she enjoys it. But after a while, it starts to feel flat, predictable, almost mechanical. This is where psychological adaptation kicks in. Humans normalize constant stimulation. What once felt exciting becomes baseline. In relationship psychology, this overlaps with habituation. When emotional patterns don't vary, the brain stops releasing the same level of dopamine response. So what used to feel like anticipation turns into routine. And routine is where attraction quietly starts to fade. The goal is not to be distant. The goal is to be alive outside the interaction, because presence without absence doesn't create emotional contrast. And without contrast, there's no pull, transition. But there's something deeper happening underneath this. Something most men completely miss. There's a concept in psychology called reactance theory. When people feel like their freedom to choose is being removed, they instinctively pull back to reclaim it. Now apply that to dating. When a man becomes overly available, he unintentionally removes choice tension from the interaction. She doesn't feel like she's choosing him anymore. It feels like he's already fully positioned himself in her life. And that creates subtle resistance. Not always conscious, but real. You might notice it like this. Slower replies, less enthusiasm, more emotional distance. Not because she's playing games, but because the psychological space that creates attraction has collapsed. The irony is this. The harder you try to eliminate uncertainty, the more you remove the emotional ingredient that creates interest in the first place. So instead of asking, how do I get closer? Sometimes the better question is, have I removed all space for her to feel anything? Transition. And this is where things get even more interesting. Because now we talk about identity. At first, she was curious about you, not just your messages, but your life, your rhythm, your personality. But when you become too available, something shifts in how she categorizes you mentally. You stop being a dynamic experience and start becoming a fixed pattern. And the brain does something important here. It prioritizes novelty for emotional engagement. This is why unpredictable emotional environments tend to feel more intense than fully stable ones early on. So when every interaction starts to look the same, the emotional imprint weakens. Let's be clear. Stability is important for long-term connection. But attraction is not built on stability alone. It's built on a balance between familiarity and discovery. If there's no discovery left, there's nothing to explore. And when there's nothing to explore, attention starts to drift. The question becomes, what about you is still unfolding in her mind? Transition. And now we reach the midpoint of the real pattern most men never notice. Here's something counterintuitive. Many men think, if I give her more attention, she'll value me more. But in many early-stage dynamics, the opposite can happen. Not because attention is bad, but because unbalanced attention removes curiosity, and curiosity is one of the strongest emotional drivers of attraction. Let that sit for a second. If she already knows exactly how invested you are, what is left for her mind to figure out? Think of attraction like oxygen in a room. If the room is too empty, it feels cold. If it's too crowded, it feels suffocating. But the sweet spot is space with presence. When you're constantly available, there is no emotional space for her to process you, miss you, or reinterpret you. And without that space, emotional bonding slows down. This connects with attachment dynamics as well. Secure attraction grows in environments where both people maintain individuality, not absence, not overpresence, but balance. A man who has a full life creates natural emotional spacing, not by strategy, but by structure. And that structure communicates something powerful without words. I am not waiting here, I am living. And that changes how you are perceived at a core level. Transition. But the deepest shift happens when we look at what this really means about self-worth. Let's be honest for a moment. Most men don't become overly available because they are trying to mess up attraction. They do it because they're afraid of losing it. So they over-text, over-check, over-engage. Not from confidence, but from uncertainty. And ironically, that behavior creates the very outcome they're trying to avoid. Because emotional anxiety leads to behavioral overcorrection. And overcorrection collapses tension. When you are comfortable with yourself, you don't need constant reassurance through interaction. You engage, then you step back into your life, naturally, not as a tactic, as a state, and people can feel the difference instantly. Transition. And that leads us to the final truth, the one that ties everything together. Attraction is not just about what you say, it's about the emotional environment you create around yourself. Some men unknowingly create a space where everything is immediate, predictable, and emotionally flat, and then they wonder why the spark disappears. But here's the deeper truth. People don't lose attraction to those who are kind, or available, or consistent. They lose attraction when there is no longer any emotional movement inside the connection. No anticipation, no curiosity, no space to imagine. And when that happens, it doesn't feel like a decision. It feels like fading. Not because you weren't enough, but because nothing inside the dynamic was still unfolding. If this resonated with you, it probably means you've seen at least part of this pattern in your own experience. And the real shift is not about becoming distant or playing games. It's about understanding emotional balance in a deeper way. Here's something to think about. Have you been showing up in a way that creates curiosity, or in a way that removes it completely? I'm curious what you think. Drop it in the comments. And in the next video, we'll go deeper into a pattern most men never recognize early enough. How emotional overinvestment slowly changes how she perceives your value without a single argument or breakup. Because sometimes, it's not what you do that changes attraction. It's what you stop leaving space for.